It's week 17 of the NFL season, and here are my predictions for this week. But first, how did I do in week 16? In week 16, I was 11-5 in my predictions. Starting off the week on Thursday Night Football, we have the 6-9 Jets versus the 10-5 Browns. Last week, the Jets won 30-28 against the Commanders. In that game, Breece Hall had 20 carries for 95 yards and 2 touchdowns rushing, and 12 receptions for 96 yards receiving. And the Browns beat the Texans 36-22. Joe Flacco completed 27 of 42 passes for 368 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. And Amari Cooper had 11 receptions for 265 yards and 2 touchdowns receiving. And that set the Browns' franchise record for most receiving yards in a single game. And that makes Amari Cooper the second player in NFL history to have a 200-yard receiving game with 3 different teams. And the only other player to do that was Terrell Owens. But also during that game, the Browns kicker Dustin Hopkins suffered a hamstring injury and will be out this week versus the Jets. But the Browns did sign Riley Patterson. And I have the Browns winning, and with this win, they will clinch a playoff spot. Moving over to Saturday, we have the 11-4 Lions versus the 10-5 Cowboys. The Lions are coming off a 30-24 win over the Vikings. Jared Goff completed 30 of 40 passes for 257 yards and a touchdown. Jahmyr Gibbs had 80 yards rushing and 2 rushing touchdowns. And Amon-Ra St. Brown had 12 receptions for 106 yards and a touchdown. And the Cowboys are coming off of a 22-20 loss against the Dolphins and have now lost 2 games in a row. But on the season, the Cowboys are 7-0 at home. And I have the Cowboys winning. Moving over to Sunday now, the 11-4 Dolphins versus the 12-3 Ravens. Last week, the Dolphins won 22-20 against the Cowboys. And in that game, Tua had 293 yards and a touchdown, and Tyreek Hill had 9 receptions for 99 yards. And that now puts Tyreek Hill at over 1,600 yards on the season. And the Ravens are coming off of a 33-19 win over the 49ers. Lamar Jackson completed 23 of 35 passes for 252 yards and 2 touchdowns and led the team with 45 yards rushing. And Zay Flowers had 9 receptions for 72 yards and a touchdown. And their defense was amazing, having 4 sacks and 5 interceptions. But I still think the Dolphins are going to win. Next, the 4-11 Patriots versus the 9-6 Bills. Last week, the Patriots won 26-23 against the Denver Broncos. Bailey Zappi completed 25 of 33 passes for 256 yards and 2 touchdowns. And on their defense, Christian Barmore had 3 sacks. And for the Bills, they won 24-22 against the Chargers. And Josh Allen completed 15 of 21 passes for 237 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. And Gabe Davis had 4 receptions for 130 yards and a touchdown. And the Bills will win. Next, the 7-8 Falcons versus the 6-9 Bears. The Falcons are coming off a 29-10 win over the Colts. In this game, Bijan Robinson led the team in both rushing and receiving yards, with 72 yards rushing and 50 yards receiving. And their kicker, Younghoe Koo, had 5 field goals during this game. And the Bears beat the Cardinals 27-16, and their run game was dominant during this game, having 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. Khalil Herbert led the team with 112 yards and a touchdown. Justin Fields also had 97 yards and a touchdown rushing, and Cole Kmet had 107 yards receiving. But I think the Falcons are going to win. Next, the 7-8 Raiders versus the 8-7 Colts. The Raiders are coming off a huge win, 20-14 over the Chiefs, to stay alive in the playoff race. In that game, the Raiders only had 205 yards of offense, but they had 2 defensive touchdowns. And the Colts are coming off a 29-10 loss to the Falcons, but I have the Colts winning. Next, the 2-13 Panthers versus the 8-7 Jaguars. The Panthers are coming off a very close loss, 33-30 to the Packers. But Bryce Young had his best career game, completing 23 of 36 passes for 312 yards and 2 touchdowns. And DJ Chark Jr. had 6 receptions for 98 yards and 2 touchdowns. And the Jaguars are coming off their 4th straight loss, 30-12 to the Buccaneers. And in that game, Trevor Lawrence suffered a shoulder injury and is right now questionable to play this week. But I still have the Jaguars winning. Next, the 5-10 Titans versus the 8-7 Texans. Last week, the Titans lost 20-17 to the Seahawks. And Derrick Henry had 19 carries for 88 yards and a touchdown. And the Texans lost 36-22 to the Browns. And CJ Stroud is questionable this week again with his concussion. But I have the Texans winning. Next, the 8-7 Rams versus the 5-10 Giants. The Rams are coming off a 30-22 win over the Saints. Matthew Stafford completed 24 of 34 passes for 328 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Kyren Williams had 104 yards rushing and a touchdown. And Puka Nacua had 9 receptions for 164 yards and a touchdown. And the Giants lost 33-25 to the Eagles. In that game, Saquon Barkley had 80 yards and a touchdown. And Darius Slayton had 3 receptions for 90 yards and a touchdown. And I have the Rams winning. Next, the 3-12 Cardinals versus the 11-4 Eagles. The Cardinals are coming off the 27-16 loss to the Bears. Kyler Murray had 230 yards and 2 touchdowns. And James Conner had 45 yards rushing and 67 yards receiving and a touchdown. And the Eagles are coming off the 33-25 win over the Giants. Jalen Hurts had 301 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. And DeAndre Swift had 92 yards and a touchdown. And the Eagles will win. Next, the 7-8 Saints versus the 8-7 Buccaneers. Last week, the Saints lost 30-22 to the Rams. And Derek Carr had 319 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. And Chris Olave had 9 receptions for 123 yards. And the Buccaneers won 30-12 against the Jaguars. Late in the third quarter, the Buccaneers were up 30-0 against the Jaguars, and Baker Mayfield had a great game again, having 283 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Mike Evans had 7 receptions for 86 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I have the Buccaneers winning. Next, the 11-4 49ers versus the 4-11 Commanders. The 49ers lost 33-19 to the Ravens last week. Brock Purdy had 255 yards and 4 interceptions. Christian McCaffrey had 103 yards and a touchdown, and George Kittle had 7 receptions for 126 yards. And the Commanders are coming off their 6th straight loss, 30-28 to the Jets. And the 49ers will win. Next, the 8-7 Steelers versus the 8-7 Seahawks. The Steelers are coming off a 34-11 win over the Bengals. In that game, Mason Rudolph had 290 yards and 2 touchdowns, and George Pickens had 4 receptions for 195 yards and 2 touchdowns. And the Seahawks won 20-17 over the Titans. Geno Smith had 227 yards, 2 touchdowns, and Tyler Lockett had 8 receptions for 81 yards. And I think the Seahawks are going to win. Next, the 8-7 Bengals versus the 9-6 Chiefs. The Bengals are coming off of a 34-11 loss to the Steelers, and Jake Browning had 335 yards, 1 touchdown, and 3 interceptions, and T. Higgins had 5 receptions for 140 yards and a touchdown. And the Chiefs lost 20-14 to the Raiders. Patrick Mahomes completed 27 of 44 passes for 235 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception, and led the team in rushing yards with 53. And I have the Bengals winning. Next, the 5-10 Chargers versus the 7-8 Broncos. Last week, the Chargers lost 24-22 to the Buffalo Bills, but that game was very close. The Chargers were up 22-21 in the fourth quarter with 28 seconds left, but the Bills kicked a field goal and won. And the Broncos lost 26-23 to the Patriots. And during the third quarter, for the Patriots, Mike Gesicki scored a touchdown, and on the kickoff, Corey Davis fumbled, and the Patriots recovered and scored a touchdown. And that's when the Patriots went up 23-7. But I still think the Broncos are going to win. And finally, on Sunday Night Football, the 7-8 Packers versus the 7-8 Vikings. The Packers barely won 33-30 against the Panthers. The Packers kicked a game-winning field goal with 19 seconds left in the game, and Aaron Jones had 21 carries for 127 yards, and Romeo Doubs had 4 receptions for 79 yards and a touchdown. And the Vikings are coming off of a 30-24 loss to the Lions, and Nick Mullins had 411 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions, and Justin Jefferson had 6 receptions for 141 yards and a touchdown. And I have the Vikings winning. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. Goodbye.